Hello, welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. How are you doing today? Hello. Welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be reading a story called Ben-Hur, but first we're going to be reading the Bible. Here is Heavy D right here. And
You are what?
I'm D Junior.
You're J.
I'm Heavy D Junior.
Except 0 D's in this boy's name. All right. My name does have a D in it.
I'm Heavy J.
Heavy J, huh? We're on the big person. I don't know why it does this sometimes. So where'd my mouse go? There we are. Yay. All right. So we're going to read the book of Judges. And then we're going to read Ben-Hur. And we are on chapter 11. So this is the English Standard Version of the Bible. Oh my goodness. Wow. Back it up a little bit. This is the English Standard Version of the Bible, and we are reading from the book of Judges. Watch out for the cord, because JJ didn't want the emergency that happened yesterday to repeat itself. So he brought me a cord. Wasn't that nice of him? And now he knows where my cord lives, and so he can get that for me when I need it. All right. This is chapter 11 from the book of Judges, English Standard Version of the Bible. Now, Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty warrior, but he was the son of a prostitute. Gilead was the father of Jephthah, and Gilead's wife also bore him sons. And when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You shall not have an inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." Then Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob, and worthless fellows collected around Jephthah and went out with him. After a time, the Ammonites made war against Israel, and when the Ammonites made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to bring Jephthah from the land of Tob. And they said to Jephthah, "Come and be our leader, that we may fight against the Ammonites." But Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Did you not hate me and drive me out of my father's house? Why have you come to me now when you are in distress?" And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "That is why we have turned to you now, that you may go with us and fight against the Ammonites and be our head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "If you bring me home again to fight against the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them over to me, I will be your head." And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "The Lord will be witness between us if we do not do as you say." So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and leader over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before the Lord at Mizpah. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites and said, "What do you have against me, that you have come to me to fight against my land?" And the king of the Ammonites answered the messengers of Jephthah, "Because Israel, on coming up from Egypt, took away my land from the Arnon to the Jabbok and to the Jordan. Now therefore restore it peaceably." Jephthah again sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites and said to him, "Thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab or the land of the Ammonites. But when they came up from Egypt, Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea and came to Kadesh. Israel then sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, 'Please let us pass through your land.' But the king of Edom would not listen. And they sent also to the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel remained at Kadesh. Then they journeyed through the wilderness and went around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and arrived on the east side of the land of Moab, and camped on the other side of the Arnon. But they did not enter the territory of Moab, for the Arnon was the boundary of Moab. Israel then sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, king of Heshbon, and Israel said to him, "Please let us pass through your land to our country." But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his country. So Sihon gathered all his people together and encamped at Jahaz and fought with Israel. And the Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. So Israel took possession of all the land of the Amorites who inhabited that country. And they took possession of all the territory of the Amorites from the Arnon to the Jabbok, and from the wilderness to the Jordan. So then the Lord, the God of Israel, dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel. And you are to take possession of them. And you are to take possession of them. Sorry, that was a question. Will you not possess that Chemosh your God gives you to possess? What Chemosh your God gives you to possess, and all that the Lord our God has dispossessed before us, we will possess. Now, are you any better than Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever contend against Israel, or did he ever go to war with them? While Israel lived in Heshbon and its villages, and in Aroer and its villages, and in all the cities that are on the banks of the Arnon, 300 years, why did you not deliver them within that time? I therefore have not sinned against you, and you do me wrong by making war on me. The Lord, the judge, decide this day between the people of Israel and the people of Ammon. But the king of the Ammonites did not listen to the words of Jephthah that he sent to him. Then the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh, and passed on to Mizpah of Gilead. And from Mizpah of Gilead he passed on to the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, "If you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering." So Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them. So the Lord gave them into his hand, and he struck them from Aroer to the neighborhood of Minnith, 20 cities, and as far as Abel Kerimim, with a great blow. So the Ammonites were subdued before the people of Israel. Then Jephthah came to his home at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. And as soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you have become the cause of great trouble to me. For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow." And she said to him, "My father, you have opened your mouth to the Lord. Do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has avenged you on your enemies, on the Ammonites." So she said to her father, "Let this thing be done for me. Let me, or leave me alone 2 months, that I may go up and down on the mountains and weep for my virginity, I and my companions." So he said, "Go." Then he sent her away for 2 months, and she departed, she and her companions, and wept for her virginity on the mountain. And at the end of 2 months she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow that he had made. She had never known a man, and it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went year by year to lament the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite, 4 days in the year. That's the end of chapter 11. Little tragic ending there. And now I think Kimberly is here to give us the synopsis. Here she is.
Look at the.
Sorry, we're on like high res mode today. That's because I grew up in the 80s. I call it high res.
I made this for Mom, Dad, and JJ.
Oh. She made a bow.
Yes, I love making bows out of wrapping paper. It is 4 pieces of wrapping paper.
It's so pretty.
This one, and this one.
Sorry, my head is so big. I feel like the talking brain.
Now my head's bigger.
Okay, so tell us what happened yesterday. It's kind of the first chapter was okay. The second chapter, not good. The third chapter, Ender was he met somebody.
Yes. What happened was, he went home. There was a bunch of. He talked with his mother about life and stuff like that.
Sure, we'll just.
Yeah, he talked with his mother.
If you want a more detailed description, you can listen to yesterday's episode.
And
Lew Wallace has nothing short of details.
yes, there is like a bajillion, million, zillion details. And so what happened was in the next chapter after that, he was watching these soldiers walk past, and he was on the roof with his younger sister. Sorry, and so what happened was one of the tiles slipped off and hit the commander on the head, and he got knocked out for like a few minutes.
Not the commander. This was the procurator.
Yeah.
It's basically like the governor of the province.
Yeah, the big guy in charge. It hit him on the head, and he was out. And
but did it kill him?
No.
No.
Everybody thought he was dead for a bit, and then the soldiers started attacking the people, and then they took over his house, and then he's like, hey, if I go with you, will you not hurt my family? And they're like, okay, sure. And so he goes with them, and he meets Jesus in the next chapter, and we find out that he's going.
Oh, I think
What I skipped?
so, okay, they arrested him.
Yeah.
Did you get that?
They arrested him.
Did I blank out for a minute? They arrested him, and they decided that he's going to be a galley slave.
Yeah.
And galley slave doesn't mean he's going to work in the kitchen and peel potatoes.
Yeah, it means he's gonna row a boat.
Yeah, a boat called a galley. Right. Okay. I don't know if that's the reason why they call the kitchen in the galley or in a ship a galley. I don't know where the etymology of that word comes from, but yes, he is going to be a slave on board a galley, and the slaves on those ships were sentenced to row. Basically, so yeah, that's basically what happened. And then in the last chapter, yes, and it's only 4 pages long, and if you missed it, then go back and listen to it again. But he did meet Jesus when they were escorting him, I guess, to his ship, and they went through Nazareth, and Jesus was there. And actually, so Joseph is a rabbi in this story. I'm not sure if that's biblically accurate, but so anyway, Jesus is his apprentice, but we all know that he's also his son. But a lot of times the son would apprentice with their father, so that's probably accurate. So anyway, going on now, book 3. Cleopatra. Our sighs of sorrow, proportioned to our cause, must be as great as that which makes it. Enter below Diomedes. How now, is he dead? Diomedes. His death upon him, but not dead. William Shakespeare, Antony and Cleopatra, Act 4, Scene 13. That's the part that's written right here. So if that was in focus, then you could read it. But I know that the resolution in these videos isn't like super duper, but it is what it is. All right, so we're going to read chapter 1. Quintus Arrius goes to sea. The city of Misenum gave name to the promontory which it crowned a few miles southwest of Naples. That's in Italy. An account of ruins is all that remains of it now, yet in the year of our Lord 24, to which it is desirable to advance the reader, that, by the way, I guess is 3 years later, I'm not sure. The place was one of the most important on the western coast of Italy. In the year mentioned, a traveler coming to the promontory to regale himself with the view there offered would have mounted a wall, and, with the city at his back, looked over the bay of Neapolis, as charming then as now, and then as now he would have seen the matchless shore, the smoking cone, the sky and waves so softly, deeply blue, Ischia here and Capri yonder, from one to the other and back again, through the purpled air his gaze would have sported at last, for the eyes do not weary of the beautiful as the palate with sweets. At last it would have dropped upon a spectacle which the modern tourist cannot see, half the reserve navy of Rome astir or at anchor below them. Thus regarded, Misenum was a very proper place for 3 masters to meet, and at leisure parcel the world among them. In the old time, moreover, there was a gateway in the wall at a certain point fronting the sea, an empty gateway forming the outlet of a street which, after the exit, stretched itself in the form of a broad mole out many stadia into the waves. The watchman on the wall above the gateway was disturbed one cool September morning by a party coming down the street in noisy conversation. He gave one look, then settled into his drowse again. There were 20 or 30 persons of the party, of whom the greater number were slaves with torches, which flamed little and smoked much, leaving on the air the perfume of the Indian nard. The masters walked in advance, arm in arm. One of them, apparently 50 years old, slightly bald and wearing over his scant locks a crown of laurel, seemed, from the attentions paid him, the central object of some affectionate ceremony. They all sported ample togas of white wool broadly bordered with purple. A glance had sufficed the watchman. He knew without question they were of high rank, and escorting a friend to ship after a night of festivity. Further explanation will be found in the conversation they carried on. "No, my Quintus," said one, speaking to him with the crown, "it is ill of fortune to take thee from us so soon. Only yesterday thou didst return from the sea beyond the pillars. Why, thou hast not even got back thy land legs." "By Castor, if a man may swear a woman's oath," said another, somewhat worse of wine, "let us not lament. Our Quintus is but going to find what he lost that night. Dice on a rolling ship is not dice on shore, eh, Quintus?" "Abuse, not fortune," exclaimed a third. "She is not blind or fickle. At Antium, where our Arrius questions her, she answers him with nods, and at sea she abides with him, holding the rudder. She takes him from us, but does she not always give him back with a new victory?" "The Greeks are taking him away," another broke in. "Let us abuse them, not the gods. In learning to trade, they forgot how to fight." With these words, the party passed the gateway and came upon the mole, with the bay before them, beautiful in the morning light. To the veteran sailor, the plash of the waves was like a greeting. He drew a long breath, as if the perfume of the water were sweeter than that of the nard, and held his hand aloft. "My gifts were at Praeneste, not Antium, and see, wind from the west. Thanks, O Fortune, my mother," he said earnestly. The friends all repeated the exclamation, and the slaves waved their torches. "She comes yonder," he continued, pointing to a galley outside the mole. "What need has a sailor for other mistress? Is your Lucrece more graceful, Machias?" He gazed at the coming ship and justified his pride. A white sail was bent to the low mast, and the oars dipped, arose, poised a moment, then dipped again with wing-like action and in perfect time. Yes, spare the gods, he said soberly, his eyes fixed upon the vessel. They send us opportunities, ours the fault if we fail. And as for the Greeks, you forget, O my Lentulus, the pirates I am going to punish are Greeks. One victory over them is of more account than 100 over the Africans. Then thy way is to the Aegean. The sailor's eyes were full of his ship. What grace, what freedom! A bird hath not less care for the fretting of the waves. See, he said, but almost immediately added, thy pardon, my Lentulus, I am going to the Aegean, and as my departure is so near, I will tell the occasion, only keep it under the rose. I would not that you abuse the Duumvir, when next you meet him. He is my friend. The trade between Greece and Alexandria, as ye may have heard, is hardly inferior to that between Alexandria and Rome. The people in that part of the world forgot to celebrate the Cerealia, and Triptolemus paid them with a harvest not worth the gathering. At all events, the trade is so grown that it will not brook interruption a day. Ye may also have heard of the Chersonian pirates nested up in the Euxine none bolder by the Bache. Yesterday, word came to Rome that, with a fleet, they had rowed down the Bosphorus, sunk the galleys off Byzantium and Chalcedon, swept the Propontis, and still unsated, burst through into the Aegean. The corn merchants, who have ships in the East Mediterranean, are frightened. They had audience with the emperor himself, and from Ravenna there go today 100 galleys, and from Misenum. He paused as if to pique the curiosity of his friends, and ended with an emphatic one. Happy Quintus, we congratulate thee. The preferment forerunneth promotion. We salute thee, Duumvir, nothing less. Quintus Arrius, the Duumvir, hath a better sound than Quintus Arrius, the tribune. In such manner they showered him with congratulations. I am glad with the rest, said the bibulous friend, very glad, but I must be practical, O my Duumvir, and not until I know if promotion will help thee to knowledge of the tessera will I have an opinion as to whether the gods mean thee ill or good in this business. Thanks, many thanks, Arrius replied, speaking to them collectively. Had ye but lanterns, I would say ye were arguers. Propole, I will go further and show what master diviners ye are. See and read. From the folds of his toga he drew a roll of paper and passed it to them, saying, Received while at table last night from Sejanus. The name was already a great one in the Roman world, great and not so infamous as it afterwards became. Sejanus! They exclaimed with one voice, closing in to read what the minister had written. Sejanus, to see Caecilius Rufus, Duumvir, Rome, 19 Cal Sept. I know Sept is September because they did have the months that we had. I don't know what the Cal means. 19, I don't know what that means. Oh, it's the 19th year of Cal, whoever the emperor was, probably. More to follow, I might look that up. Caesar hath good report of Quintus Arrius the tribune. In particular, he hath heard of his valor manifested in the western seas, insomuch that it is his will that the said Quintus be transferred instantly to the east. It is our Caesar's will, further, that you cause 100 triremes of the first class and full appointment to be dispatched without delay against the pirates who have appeared in the Aegean, and that Quintus be sent to command the fleet so dispatched. Details are thine, my Cecilius. The necessity is urgent, as thou wilt be advised by the reports enclosed for thy perusal and the information of the said Quintus. Sejanus. Arrius gave little heed to the reading. As the ship drew more plainly out of the perspective, she became more and more an attraction to him. The look with which he watched her was that of an enthusiast. At length he tossed the loosened folds of his toga in the air, in reply to the signal over the upholstery or fan-like fixture at the stern of the vessel. A scarlet flag was displayed, while several sailors appeared upon the bulwarks, and swung themselves hand over hand up the ropes to the antenna or yard, and furled the sail. The bow was put round, and the time of the oars increased 1/2, so that at racing speed she bore down directly towards him and his friends. He observed the maneuvering with a perceptible brightening of the eyes. Her instant answer to the rudder and the steadiness with which she kept her course were especially noticeable as virtues to be relied upon in action. By the nymph, said one of the friends, giving back the roll, we may no longer say our friend will be great. He is already great. Our love will now have famous things to feed upon. What more hast thou for us? Nothing more, Arrius replied. What ye have of the affair is by this time old news in Rome, especially between the palace and the forum. The Duumvir is discreet. What I am to do, where go to find my fleet, he will tell on the ship, where a sealed package is waiting for me. If, however, ye have offerings for any of the altars today, pray the gods for a friend plying oar and sail somewhere in the direction of Sicily. But she is here and will come too, he said, reverting to the vessel. I have interest in her masters. They will sail and fight with me. It is not an easy thing to lay shipside on a shore like this, so let us judge their training and skill. What? Is she new to thee? I never saw her before, and, as yet, I know not if she will bring me one acquaintance. Is that well? It matters but little. We of the sea come to know each other quickly. Our loves, like our hates, are born of sudden dangers. The vessel was of the class called Navis Liburnice, long, narrow, low in the water, and modeled for speed and quick maneuver. The bow was beautiful. A jet of water spun from its foot as she came on, sprinkling all the prow, which rose in graceful curvature twice a man's stature above the plane of the deck. Upon the bending of the sides were figures of tritons blowing shells. Below the bow, fixed to the keel and projecting forward under the waterline, was the rostrum, or beak, a device of solid wood, reinforced and armed with iron, in action used as a ram. A stout moulding extended from the bow the full length of the ship's sides, defining the bulwarks, which were tastefully crenellated below the moulding in 3 rows, each covered with a cap or shield of bull hide, were the holes in which the oars were worked, 60 on the right, 60 on the left. In further ornamentation, caduceae leaned against the lofty prow. 2 immense ropes passing across the bow marked the number of anchors stowed on the foredeck. The simplicity of the upper works declared the oars the chief dependence of the crew. A mast set a little forward of midship was held by 4 and back stays and shrouds fixed to rings on the inner side of the bulwarks. The tackle was that required for the management of one great square sail and the yard to which it was hung. Above the bulwarks the deck was visible, save the sailors who had reefed the sail and yet lingered on the yard. But one man was to be seen by the party on the mole, and he stood by the prow, helmeted and with a shield. The 120 oaken blades, kept white and shining by pumice and the constant wash of the waves, rose and fell as if operated by the same hand, and drove the galley forward with a speed rivaling that of a modern steamer. So rapidly and apparently so rashly did she come that the landsmen of the tribune's party were alarmed. Suddenly the man by the prow raised his hand with a peculiar gesture, whereupon all the oars flew up, poised a moment in the air, then fell straight down. The water boiled and bubbled about them. The galley shook in every timber and stopped as if scared. Another gesture of the hand, and again the oars arose, feathered and fell, but this time those on the right, dropping toward the stern, pushed forward, while those on the left, dropping towards the bow, pulled backwards. 3 times the oars thus pushed and pulled against each other. Round to the right the ship swung as upon a pivot. Then, caught by the wind, she settled gently broadside to the mole. The movement brought the stern to view with all its garniture. Tritons like those at the bow, name in large raised letters, the rudder at the side, the elevated platform upon which the helmsman sat, a stately figure in full armor, his hands upon the rudder rope, and the upholsterer, high, gilt, carved, and bent over the helmsman like a great rucinate leaf. Runcinate leaf. In the midst of the rounding to, a trumpet was blown, brief and shrill, and from the hatchways out poured the marines, all in superb equipment, brazen helms, burnished shields, and javelins. While the fighting men thus went to quarters as for action, the sailors proper climbed the shrouds and perched themselves along the yard. The officers and musicians took their posts. There was no shouting or needless noise. When the oars touched the mole, a bridge was sent out from the helmsman's deck. Then the tribune turned to his party and said, with a gravity he had not before shown, "Duty now, O my friends." He took the chapelet from his head, and gave it to the dice player. "Take thou my myrtle, or the myrtle, O favorite of the tessera," he said. "If I return, I will seek my sesterity again. If I am not victor, I will not return. Hang the crown in the atrium." To the company he opened his arms, and they came one by one and received his parting embrace. "The gods go with thee, O Quintus," they said. "Farewell," he replied. To the slaves waving their torches, he waved his hand. Then he turned to the waiting ship, beautiful with the ordered ranks and crested helms and shields and javelins. As he stepped upon the bridge, the trumpet sounded, and over the upholsterer rose the vexillum purpureum, or pennant of the commander of a fleet. Chapter 2, At the Oar. See how long this one is. All right. Chapter 2, At the Oar. The tribune, standing upon the helmsman's deck, with the order of the duumvir open in his hand, spoke to the chief of the rowers. "What force hast thou?" "Of oarsmen, 252, 10 supernumeraries, making reliefs of 84. And thy habit?" "It has been to take off and put on every 2 hours." The tribune mused a moment. "The division is hard, and I will reform it, but not now. The oars may not rest day or night." Then to the sailing master he said, "The wind is fair. Let the sail help the oars." When the two thus addressed were gone, he turned to the chief pilot. What service hast thou had? 32 years. In what seas chiefly? Between our Rome and the East. Thou art the man I would have chosen. The tribune looked at his orders again. Past the Campanilian Cape, the course will be to Messina. Beyond that, follow the bend of the Calabrian shore till Melito is on thy left. Then, knowest thou the stars that govern in the Ionian Sea? I know them well. Then, from Melito, course eastward for Cythera. The gods willing, I will not anchor until in the bay of Antemona. The duty is urgent. I rely upon thee. A prudent man was Arrius, prudent, and of the class which, while enriching the altars at Praeneste and Antium, was of opinion, nevertheless, that the favor of the blind goddess depended more upon the votary's care and judgment than upon his gifts and vows. All night, as master of the feast, he had sat at table drinking and playing, yet the odor of the sea returned him to the mood of the sailor, and he would not rest until he knew his ship. Knowledge leaves no room for chances. Having begun with the chief of the rowers, the sailing master, and the pilot, in company with the other officers, the commander of the Marines, the keeper of the stores, the master of the machines, the overseer of the kitchen or the fires, he passed through the several quarters. Nothing escaped his inspection. When he was through of the community crowded within the narrow walls, he alone knew perfectly well all there was of material preparation for the voyage and its possible incidents. And, finding the preparation complete, there was left him but one thing further: thorough knowledge of the personnel of his command. As this was the most delicate and difficult part of his task, requiring much time, he set about it his own way. At noon that day, the galley was skimming the sea of Paestum. The wind was yet from the west, filling the sail to the master's consent. The watches had been established. On the foredeck, the altar had been set and sprinkled with salt and barley, and before it the tribune had offered solemn prayers to Jove and to Neptune, and all the Oceanide, and with vows poured the wine and burned the incense. And now, the better to study his men, he was seated in the great cabin, a very martial figure. The cabin, it should be stated, was the central compartment of the galley, in extent quite 65 by 30 feet, and lighted by 3 broad hatchways. A row of stanchions ran from end to end, supporting the roof, and near the center the mast was visible, all bristling with axes and spears and javelins. To each hatchway there were double stairs descending right and left, with a pivotal arrangement at the top to allow the lower ends to be hitched to the ceiling. And as all these were now raised, the compartment had the appearance of a skylighted hall. The reader will understand readily that this was the heart of the ship, the home of all aboard: eating room, sleeping chamber, field of exercise, lounging place of duty, uses made possible by the laws which reduce life there to minute details, and a routine relentless as death. At the after end of the cabin there was a platform reached by several steps. Upon it the chief of the rowers sat. In front of him a sounding table, upon which, with a gavel, he beat time for the oarsman. At his right a clepsydra, or water clock, to measure the reliefs and watches. Above him, on a higher platform, well guarded by gilded railing, the tribune had his quarters, overlooking everything, and furnished with a couch, a table, and a cathedra, or chair, cushioned and with arms and high back, articles which the imperial dispensation permitted of the utmost elegance. Thus at ease, lounging in the great chair, swaying with the motion of the vessel, the military cloak half draping his tunic, sword in belt, Arrius kept watchful eye over his command and was as closely watched by them. He saw critically everything in view, but dwelt longest upon the rowers. The reader would doubtless have done the same, only he would have looked with much sympathy, while, as is the habit with masters, the tribune's mind ran forward of what he saw, inquiring for results. The spectacle was simple enough of itself. Along the sides of the cabin, fixed to the ship's timbers, were what at first appeared to be 3 rows of benches. A closer view, however, showed them a succession of rising banks, in each of which the second bench was behind and above the first one, and the third above and behind the second. To accommodate the 60 rowers on a side, the space devoted to them permitted 19 banks separated by intervals of 1 yard, with a 20th bank divided so that what would have been its upper seat or bench was directly above the lower seat of the first bank. The arrangement gave each rower, when at work, ample room, if he timed his movement with those of his associates, the principle being that of soldiers marching with a cadent ship in close order. The arrangement also allowed a multiplication of banks limited only by the length of the galley. As to the rowers, those upon the first and second benches sat, while those upon the third, having longer oars to work, were suffered to stand. The oars were loaded with lead in the handles, and near the point of balance hung to pliable thongs, making possible the delicate touch called feathering, but at the same time increasing the need of skill, since an eccentric wave might at any moment catch a heedless fellow and hurl him from his seat. Each oar hole was a vent through which the laborer opposite it had his plenty of sweet air. Light streamed down upon him from the grating which formed the floor of the passage between the deck and the bulwark over his head. In some respects, therefore, the condition of the men might have been much worse. Still, it must not be imagined that there was any pleasantness in their lives. Communication between them was not allowed. Day after day they filled their places without speech. In hours of labor they could not see each other's faces. Their short respites were given to sleep and the snatching of food. They never laughed. No one ever heard one of them sing. What is the use of tongues when a sigh or a groan will tell all men feel while perforce they think in silence. Existence with the poor wretches was like a stream underground sweeping slowly, laboriously on to its outlet, wherever that might chance to be. O Son of Mary, the sword has now a heart, and thine the glory. So now, but in the days of which we are writing, for captivity there was drudgery on walls, and in the streets and mines, and the galleys, both of war and commerce, were insatiable. First sea when Drulius won the first sea fight for his country, Romans plied the oars, and the glory was to the rower not less than the marine. These benches, which now we are trying to see as they were, testified to the change come with conquest, and illustrated both the policy and the prowess of Rome. Nearly all the nations had sons there, mostly prisoners of war, chosen for their brawn and endurance. In one place a Briton, before him a Libyan, behind him a Crimean, elsewhere a Scythian, a Gaul, and a Thebesite. Roman convicts cast down to consort with Goths and Longobardi, Jews, Ethiopians, and barbarians from the shores of Maeotis. Here an Athenian, there a red-haired savage from Hibernia, yonder blue-eyed giants of the Cimbri. In the labor of the rowers there was not enough art to give occupation to their minds, rude and simple as they were. The reach forward, the pull, the feathering, the blade, the dip were all there was of it, motions most perfect when most automatic. Even the care forced upon them by the sea outside grew in time to be a thing instinctive rather than of thought. So, as the result of long service, the poor wretches became imbruted, patient, spiritless, obedient creatures of vast muscle and exhausted intellects, who lived upon recollections generally few but dear, and at last lowered into the semi-conscious alchemic state wherein misery turns to habit and the soul takes on incredible endurance. From right to left, hour after hour, the tribune, swaying in his easy chair, turned with thought of everything rather than the wretchedness of the slaves upon the benches. Their motions, precise and exactly the same on both sides of the vessel, after a while became monotonous, and then he amused himself singling out individuals. With his stylus he made note of objections, thinking of if all went well, he would find among the pirates of whom he was in search better men for the places. There was no need of keeping the proper names of the slaves brought to the galleys as to their graves, so for convenience they were usually identified by the numerals painted upon the benches to which they were assigned. As the sharp eyes of the great man moved from seat to seat on either hand, they came at last to number 60, which, as has been said, belonged properly to the last bank on the left-hand side, but wanting room aft, had been fixed above the first bench on the first bank. There they rested. The bench of number 60 was slightly above the level of the platform, and but a few feet away. The light glinting through the grating over his head gave the rower fairly to the tribune's view, erect, and, like all his fellows, naked except a cincture about the loins. There were, however, some point in his favor. He was very young, not more than 20. Furthermore, Arrius was not merely given to dice. He was a connoisseur of men physically, and when ashore indulged a habit of visiting the gymnasia to see and admire the most famous athleta. From some professor, doubtless, he had caught the idea that strength was as much of the quality as the quantity of the muscle, while superiority in performance required a certain mind as well as strength. Having adopted the doctrine, like most men with a hobby, he was always looking for illustrations to support it. The reader may well believe that while the tribune, in the search for the perfect, was often called upon to stop and study, he was seldom perfectly satisfied. In fact, very seldom held as long as on this occasion. In the beginning of each movement of the oar, the rower's body and face were brought into profile view from the platform. The movement ended with the body reversed, and in a pushing posture. The grace and ease of the action at first suggested a doubt of the honesty of the effort put forth, but it was speedily dismissed. The firmness with which the oar was held while in the reach forward, its bending under the push, were proofs of the force applied. Not that only, they as certainly proved the rower's art, and put the critic in the great armchair in search of the combination of strength and cleverness with which was the central idea of his theory. In course of the study, Arrius observed the subject's youth, wholly unconscious of tenderness on that account. He also observed that he seemed of good height, and that his limbs, upper and nether, were singularly perfect. The arms, perhaps, were too long, but the objection was well hidden under a mass of muscle which in some movements swelled and knotted like kinking cords. Every rib in the round body was discernible, yet the leanness was the healthful reduction so strained after in the palæstra. And altogether there was in the rower's action a certain harmony, which, besides addressing itself to the tribune's theory, stimulated both his curiosity and general interest. Very soon he found himself waiting to catch a view of the man's face in full. The head was shapely and balanced upon a neck broad at the base, but of exceeding pliancy and grace. The features in profile were of oriental outline and of that delicacy of expression which has always been thought a sign of blood and sensitive spirit. With these observations, the tribune's interest in the subject deepened. By the gods, he said to himself, the fellow impresses me. He promises well. I will know more of him. Directly, the tribune caught the view he wished. The rower turned and looked at him. A Jew and a boy! Under the gaze then fixed steadily upon him, the large eyes of the slave grew larger. The blood surged to his very brows. The blade lingered in his hands. But instantly, with an angry crash, down fell the gavel of the orator. The rower started, withdrew his face from the inquisitor, and, as if personally chidden, dropped the oar half feathered. When he glanced again at the tribune, he was vastly more astonished. He was met with a kindly smile. Meantime, the galley entered the Straits of Messina, and skimming past the city of that name, was after a while turned eastward, leaving the cloud over Etna in the sky astern. Often, as Arrius returned to his platform in the cabin, he returned to study the rower, and he kept saying to himself, the fellow hath a spirit. A Jew is not a barbarian. I will know more of him. Chapter 3 is called Arrius and, you guessed it, Ben-Hur on deck. The first word is the, and we will read that tomorrow. So thank you for coming today. I hope you're enjoying the story of Ben-Hur. Yes, that's definitely too long to read today. I can't do those hour-and-a-half ones that they wear me out. Thank you so much for coming today and joining our story. We appreciate you. And if you like our story, then go ahead and it's okay to do the thumbs up icon, or if you're on,
we appreciate you.
That's right. If you're on Facebook, you can actually do a heart icon, and heart icons are okay. That's fine. It's all right. I might not send you a Valentine for giving me a heart, but you can give me a heart. It's fine. Granny Bear has given me 3 hearts today, and for that, I appreciate that. So go ahead and sing it.
We appreciate you.
It's true. All right. It's true, we do. I'm a poet and didn't know it. So, but go ahead and leave some comments. Tell us what you think about the story. I know it's a little bit of a slower story than what we have before, but okay, that's good. So, but I did want to say, this is something that I was thinking of yesterday and I forgot to mention it. Because yesterday's story, I was thinking, because Ben-Hur, who is Judah in the yesterday's chapters, was talking about he was going to join the army, but he wasn't going to join the army because he wanted to support Rome. He was going to join the army so that he could learn all the army tactics and then fight against Rome. That was his purpose of joining the army. But before he could join the army, of course, he had his little incident where he accidentally almost killed Gratus, who was the procurator of Judah at the time, and that kind of ended his military aspirations, And so now he's this slave number 60 on this galley where Arrius is on board. So we will find the next whatever happens. Tomorrow is Wednesday and the kids have Awanas, so probably it'll be Thursday when we read next time. So I look forward to seeing you then, and God bless you. Have a great evening, and we will see you again. Good night.